This is Talking Drupal, a bi-weekly chat about web design and development by a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. Visit us at talkingdrupal.com. This is episode 2 of Exploring Drupal 8. What's new in core, part 2. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Steve.
Welcome back. So we're now recording episode number 2 of this condensed Drupal 8 series we're putting together. And today we're talking about what's new in core part 2. So if you haven't listened to part 1, back up 1 episode and listen to that first, because we're going to continue on. And joining us today, I'm Stephen Cross from Parallax. We've got John Picozzi from Oomph. We have Nick Laughlin from Enlightened Design, and we have our 2 guests, Nick Salvaggio and Mike Morzavilla. I got that right this time, I think.
All right.
From Sego Solutions. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome. Good to be here.
Hey, guys.
So like we did in episode 1, we're going to jump right in and just hit our list of topics today. Today we're going to be talking about site building and core changes, and primarily changes to content type creation. We're going to talk about display modes. We're going to talk about the new block system, comment types, and configuration management. So let's get rolling.
Yes, lots to cover. So there's a lot of changes to the areas that you kind of outlined there, and I guess to start with the changes to content type creation. So right away, when you go and create a piece of content on the site, whether it's a basic page or article, the 2 content types that still ship with core, you're going to notice that page has a new layout. It has kind of a left and right sort of feel instead of a top and bottom, where all your content creation is going to happen on the left, and then kind of all your options on what you want to do with it are kind of going to be on the right. I personally feel it's cleaner. It's a little bit easier. I think new users to Drupal will have an easier, more familiar time with this sort of layout. People who are familiar with Drupal will notice, small changes. Publish is now promote. So some of those verbiages have changed a bit, but for the most part, creating content is very similar, but has some nice new features, especially once you start getting into fielding your content types and things like that. We have a new concept of displays and form displays within fielding your content, where we now have the display, which is, and these are all tabs on the on top of the content creation screen there when you're fielding your content. So the display is what your end users will see, and how the fields will lay out and things like that. And then we have a separate tab called form display, which is what your content editors will see. So basically, it's the form itself in which, when they're creating the content, how they're going to see it. In Drupal 7, this was all just one screen where you would kind of manage both of these all within the same UI. And I think there's some really cool benefits of breaking this out into 2 screens. One of the biggest ones being you can kind of take certain things that you may not want your content creators to see, such as maybe, for instance, that publish or what is now promote option. If there's not a need for your content creators to use that, you can now just remove that from the form display. You can just drag it down into disabled, and your content creators won't have that option there. So that's just one quick example of how form displays separated from user displays are kind of cool.
That's great. Do you have the option to create different kinds of form displays, like kind of a la display suite kind of thing? Or is that not part of what's in 8?
Not that I've seen, no. It's basically, you can kind of say, when a user's going there to create content, this is how they're going to see it. I haven't seen any variation off of that, at least not as of yet. But that would be pretty cool. I think
that would be really cool.
Almost like we're going to get into view modes next, but almost like a view mode for form modes,
Right.
or form displays. Sorry, not to. so, so, yeah, there's these concepts of displays, form displays, view modes, and form modes. So it's kind of a lot of similar verbiage surrounding different areas of a E8 site building.
Makes your head spin a little bit.
Yeah.
So maybe you can clarify what each of those things are now.
Sure. So the next thing we're going to talk about is display modes. So within Drupal 8, we have this area called display modes, and that houses our view modes and our form modes. So then we basically have four different areas. We have our display, our form display, our view modes, and our form modes. So the display, I like to think of the display as what the end user will see, how the end user will see our content. That's our display. Then we have our form display, which is how our content creators are going to see the form that's used to create the content itself. And we have control over each of those. Then we have this concept of view modes, which it's not a new concept, but it's a way for us to display a subset of fields to our end user. So it's a way to control the display and say if we have a piece of content with 10 fields, but in certain scenarios we only want to show 2 fields, we can create a separate view mode for that. And we can choose which one to display in various different ways.
Like our teaser, which is
exactly. What's nice about Drupal 8 is so in Drupal 7 we had view modes and we had things like teasers and full content and default content, but those were kind of they were called what they were called and they weren't really editable or extendable. And now we have the ability to edit and extend that in Drupal 8, where maybe full content or teaser doesn't really mean anything to our audience that we're exposing this to create the content. Maybe full article or sub article or some other verbiage is more relevant to them. We can now go in there and simply just retitle these and extend and add more of them. And we have a nice UI that kind of wraps around all that, which is really nice. Which kind of leads us to form mode. So the way I kind of like to explain form modes is basically it's a view mode, but not for a display. It's a view mode for a form that not a content creator would have access to, but an end user would have access to. And currently within Drupal 8, that only applies to the user registration form. So here we have a form that is not used for content creation. It's actually used by an end user. They see that form. So we can use form modes similar to view modes to display a subset of fields within our user registration process. If that makes sense.
It does.
Okay. So rather than having the show this field on the registration form checkbox, you use the form mode to determine what shows up on the registration.
Yes. So you can build out your user registration form and then create a different form modes off of that to kind of break that down to, when the user would see, how they would see that form.
Mike, could you also use that? Excuse me. Could you also use that as a way to expose content type to users? So, for example, if you had, a content type of like project and you wanted somebody to enter their own project, could you use those modes as a way to give them like a project content type that they could fill out?
Yeah. Go ahead, Nick. I'm sorry. You look like you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I think currently no, right? I think it's just on the user entity, but
for the form modes itself, yeah, it looks like it only applies specifically to like when you navigate to structure, display modes, and form modes, you see that it's a very stripped down UI. It's pretty much only allows you to access the user registration form. And from there, you can kind of just set different modes. And then if you go and go to structure, appearance, where the user registration form is, you'll see then you'll have a drop down for different modes on there as well. So you can say, hey, show the full form or show the sub form. Or
actually, you know what? I think we're wrong about that. I'm playing around with it as we're speaking, and it looks like you can create custom form modes for different types of entities. So you can go here and say add new form mode, and when you do select that, it asks you what entity do you want to create this form mode for. So we have custom block, comment, contact message, content, taxonomy term, and user.
Okay, so I think what may be confusing here is, now that you mentioned that, I remember running into this in one of the earlier betas. You can create it, but it doesn't show up on the list. You have to just know the URL path to get to the.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that might be it. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so I don't know if it shows up in the UI in it yet. It creates that kind of form mode. It just doesn't give you access to it without knowing the pattern.
Interesting.
So it looks like we may have the ability to set different forms for content types. Is that what you're saying? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you could expose a different form mode depending on how that person's accessing it. It's probably integrated with views. So you could, for example, say if somebody with this role is visiting this form, they get this output. If this other person's visiting it, they get this other format. That could be extremely useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it looks like it's integrated just like the display modes in 7, where there's a checkbox at the bottom for custom display settings. Do you want to make whatever custom form mode you created configurable? You check that off, and now, just like the display modes, we have a form mode that's configurable.
Yeah, I mean, that may actually be somewhat new, because I
wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I know, because I've played around in there quite a bit, and I don't recall ever having the option. I'm playing around now as we're speaking, but I don't recall ever having the option to kind of select the way you can select now. You have a whole list of entities that you can apply that to. So that's really cool, actually.
That's why this thing is called Exploring Drupal 8, because
exactly
exploration, discovering new things all the time.
We'll give it a year before we develop the definitive guide.
Yeah,
exactly.
Definitive guide of exploring more. But so yeah, that's kind of a 20,000 foot overview of the displays and form displays and view modes and form modes.
Clearly a place that people should put some attention on and play around with.
Absolutely.
To get a feel for it, because it's to hear, as I'm sitting back listening to the description of it, it does get a little confusing on what we're talking about and which name implies which feature. So it's definitely something to dig into a bit. So let's move on to blocks.
Alrighty, so the block system. The block system in Drupal 8 has been completely rewritten, and one of the most exciting pieces that at least I'm looking forward to building with Drupal 8. There's a lot of different, a lot of changes with the block system. So one of the biggest things is blocks are now a fieldable entity. And we can have more than just our title and our body field. We can field blocks out, and we also have this concept of block types. So we can have, similar to content types, we can have custom block types, where these block types are fielded in their own particular way, and when we want to use them, we can create a specific block type, not just a general block, which I'm kind of curious to hear what other folks' takes are on that. I'm excited to start building with Drupal 8 to see where and when I use a block type over a content type, and how it kind of plays into the whole kind of site architecture flow. But it's going to make blocks more usable again, where for a while for us, they weren't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think hearing the news that they're entities is really exciting, and by extension that they're fieldable. But once Yeah, once you get the block types, it kind of really made me scratch my head. It's one of those things where, like you said, I think I'll reserve judgment until I've used it for a little while. I think it's one of those things where, in general, you're not going to use it, but when you need it, it's incredibly useful.
Mm-hmm.
I just have no idea what that situation is at this point.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. Like, I feel like it's a powerful, flexible thing, but I feel that I need to build with Drupal 8 a little bit more before I kind of like sink my teeth into when I'm going to use it. The one thing that I have been kind of tossing around is because the blocks are fieldable now, having a like something like an about me block, right? That would have for a blog that would have like an image and like a little like blurb about you, and you could kind of take that new custom block type and place it in different areas and do things with it. At least that's the example I've been giving in some of my trainings on how to use a custom block type. I just kind of field it out with an image, with an image field, which is you couldn't traditionally do. And now you have this kind of about me block type that you can, but then creating multiple instances off of it.
So here's my biggest question: have they included block access or some sort of access permissions to blocks in core?
I don't know. Yeah, that's probably the part of Drupal 8 that I've touched the least. It's come up a couple of times in the past two web series that we were doing here, where permissions around a lot of the new core features, where typically, we've used some contributed modules. That
I mean, you still have the typical role restriction within the individual block itself. The block system itself, the API is much cleaner, so you can develop your own block forms within any given block. So you can have different pieces of code execute when a block renders, when you can configure a block. So it's probably right now, I don't think there's anything in the UI, but we can definitely develop things against a given block as they don't display in certain situations.
Yeah,
gotcha.
So in addition to that, the UI for the block screen has been completely kind of it's been revamped. There's no more having this massive list of unused blocks just compiled on the bottom. We have this nice little place block button, which will open up a modal and allow us to kind of see the available blocks. We have a filter built right into that, which again was another contributed module that if you ever use block filter, to help weed down some of the massive block screens that are there. But things like that, I think, are just going to make usability, especially for newcomers, a lot more manageable. Especially the block administration screen can get really unwieldy really quick in Drupal 7 and previous versions. So I think this helps. At one point, they had like a split screen where it was like this little side menu with the blocks, and kind of late in the release candidate cycle, they switched over to this modal, which is a bit interesting. I was a fan of the little side menu, but for some reason they went with the modal, which, I mean, they're both improvements. So I guess it's more personal taste than anything else.
So you mentioned here in the notes that they're exportable. Yes. Is it just the fields and instances that are exportable, or is the actual like block with the content exportable?
It's just the configuration that's exportable. So we can export our our fields and things like that from one instance to the next. So yeah, it's not the content itself.
Well, it could be, because if you develop a block that has maybe not using the field API, but if you have a block form within a custom block that stores configuration, it will export that. So like in the trainings that we do with module development, we store configuration within the block and then expose it. It's really on the block form during configuration. It's not really the content within a given field. So certain aspects will be exportable, but it's all within the configuration itself.
Okay.
And the cool thing about that too is that it's per instance. I think I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but you can have blocks in multiple regions, and those multiple regions have its own configuration itself within the same block, which can be very powerful.
Yeah, so that's another good point, that now we can have blocks in multiple regions within our site, so we're not just stuck to having a block appear in the sidebar one, and that's the only place it can appear. We can put blocks in any region that we want, as many times as we want, and control just through the URL which page it'll display on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, another cool thing too is and this is kind of a small takeaway, but I think it could be large, is the page title is now a block.
Yeah. A lot of components within Drupal 8 are now blocks. Like page title is probably the biggest one, where now if you want your page title to appear in a different region, you can simply move it around, and just makes
Say
again?
Page title, do you mean like the SEO page title or the H1 of the content that you're on?
Yeah.
The H1 of the content that you're on. What displays on the page?
Oh, God, that is such a pain in the ass to move around sometimes.
Yeah, in Drupal 7, it's
or like if you just don't want to display the title, like that's
the module
Yeah.
ready to template or write a view to take over the display. It's very cool.
I don't actually see that block. What is that block called?
it's just called page title. So if you go into any region and
I see it. There it is.
You got
it? Yeah.
Also, our site branding is now in a block. So
yeah.
So that's a nice little feature as well, where we can manage our site branding right through a block and move it around. So lots of cool stuff with the.
Oh yeah, and that's taken out of the theme. So I know our next episode we'll be talking a little bit about theming, but the site branding block now has the site logo, site name, and site slogan checkboxes. That's now not in the appearance section of our configuration anymore. It's in a block.
Yep.
So clearly, block is another place to spend a little extra time.
Yes, definitely.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's going to be one of those things as we understand it a little bit better, we'll find new and creative ways to use it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
So let's talk about comment types.
Yeah, so comment types, very similar. It's similar theme to a lot of things in Drupal. They're now fieldable, and they can be applied to different entities, and they work very similar to content types, where we can have different comment types associated with different pieces of content, and there's different fields. We can have full blown kind of questionnaires built into our comments, and makes it a lot more flexible. And I think that the biggest takeaway with the comment types is that they're fieldable and can be applied to multiple entities. That's a big.
Can you choose the type of comment you want when you're creating content?
Yes. Yeah, you can. Okay. You drop down. You can say, like, give me the questionnaire one comment, or give me the basic comment, and you can kind of select. Okay. The only problem is just like if you have content already created, you're restricted to what was selected on the go around.
Well, that's another module that might get used that I very rarely used in the past.
Yeah, so do we. I mean, we've been kind of Discuss users for a while now. We just turned Drupal commenting off and use Discuss.
It's going to be tough to get away from Discuss. Discuss is great. So, but at least this makes it a little bit more flexible right out of the box, that you can do a couple more things with it.
Cool.
Okay, so then a biggie, and one that I know Nick, Laffin, I know you're interested in. We've talked offsite about this a bit, is the configuration management initiative within Drupal 8, and how that kind of changes some of what we're doing as far as moving around our configuration and what can be moved around. Something we touched upon when we were talking about blocks is now blocks are now exportable, which for us was a huge hindrance of kind of doing too much with them in the past, is because they were very difficult to kind of move around. So we kind of just navigated around using them, because moving them from one environment to the next became challenging, and there was other modules to help with it, but it just was one more reason not to use blocks that we don't have anymore. So with the configuration management initiative in Drupal 8, there's a UI and a section within this the system that allows us to basically export and import and kind of view what was changed from environment to environment. And there's a lot more going on the back end with that as far as what it's actually doing. But from a basic site builder's perspective, it gives some folks that are used to using the UI a way to kind of take configuration, pull it out, either a full site dump or specific areas like the blocks or certain content types. You're able to pull out and move upstream from like a dev environment to a test environment.
Yeah, I think that's an important takeaway too, is that we're talking about from environment to environment of the same site, not two different sites.
Yeah.
I think that was the biggest emotional roller coaster of the Drupal 8 development cycle. The initial promise was that you'd be able to move it pretty much anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I followed fairly closely what was going on, so I understand why I had to change. But the first time I installed that, I hadn't quite noticed that part, and tried moving it and was a little confused. But after looking through everything, it certainly makes sense. It's more about promotion, as you guys said, or testing, rather than the features kind of functionality.
Yeah, and that's why features is still going to live, right? We're still going to see the features module, which is going to serve that.
And if I recall, they even step back a little bit further, and configuration is actually still written to the database.
It is.
It's just exported into the files, make it easy to move around. But they found that there were, I think, some fairly serious performance implications to reading from file.
Yeah, one cool thing too you can do with configuration. We did this at one of our meetups not too long ago. We just sat down and said, all right, let's figure out how configuration management works and just hack away at it. And you can configure the default store to be the file system instead of the database. By default, it is the database. The active configuration is in the database. When you export it, it goes to the file system. But you can configure it where the file system is the default active store. And that's pretty cool, because when you're configuring a site, you can, put, just for testing or something, put your configuration within your Git system, and you can see exactly what changes when you change things on your site right in real time, pretty much.
Without exporting, right?
Without exporting, exactly.
Right, yeah. So the big benefit here is if you're using a system like Git to move content around, or to configure, or to manage your code, now you can manage your configuration the same way.
Yep.
So a workflow would be, I'm sitting here doing dev work, I update a few views, I add a couple of content types, I export, then I push my code up to the dev environment through Git, and then I do the import on that end.
Yep.
So it removes a lot of
the file, right?
What's that?
You can import from the file system, correct? So you don't need to.
Yep.
It's not like views where you'd have to export it, copy, paste into the import. You still just push up with Git and then run the import function.
Exactly right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. What's cool too is there's a couple of DA contributed modules that there's two in particular. One is Contrib Toolkit, I think. Configuration Toolkit. And there's another one. There's two of them that I'm looking forward to playing with that I haven't had too much time to play with yet. And one basically, it basically restricts users from making any configuration changes upstream. And if they go to do it, it doesn't let them. It forces them to make changes downstream and have it pushed up the version control path. So I think that's a good feature for certain clients that want to make sure that, hey, there's no snap changes done on live, or no content inadvertently gets pushed to live that haven't gone through a structured process. There's another module that I believe is going to allow for integration with a Git repository. And allow you to cut the tag and everything right from the UI. So basically, you'd go and do your dev work, change a couple of views. You'd be able to, export your work, push it to a designated Git repo, cut the tag, all within all encapsulated within the UI. So
Yeah, so these modules are the one Mike's talking about now is called config tools, config_tools, and the one that locks your config in a live environment is config_read only.
Yeah, that's it. Read only. Yeah.
I'm actually really glad you guys brought that up because I was going to totally troll you guys on being so happy about config management. How do I prevent this from changing on the live server? And then I got to pull it back into my repository. So glad we talked about that. Now I don't have to be Debbie Downer.
Yeah, and having the config tools, I'm really looking forward to that because I think that's going to help, expose just a way for folks who may not be familiar with the whole Git workflow. It kind of gives them a way to version control their work without, we can set up a Git repo for them. They can go in, they can do what they need to do, and it just kind of the magic just kind of happens. And now they're version controlling their work, and they don't necessarily have to know Git, and I think it just makes it easier for folks to kind of do it the way we all want it done without having to perhaps know some of the things that they don't always know. So,
yeah. All right, great. So let's wrap up episode 2. We're going to move on to episode 3, which will be talking about theming. A reminder that this is an 8-part series to get you started in Drupal 8 quick. There's 3 parts. Or 6 parts are going to be audio and video. And then we have 2 webinars scheduled for January 12th and January 19th for you to ask questions live and get your questions answered. You can sign up for that at exploringdrupal8.com. And a reminder of who's joined us today. We have Nick from Sego Solutions. Nick, where can people find you online and reach out to you?
Yeah, so I'm at my Twitter handle is @direct. And our website is sagosolutions.com. And we also have a project at stackstarter.io if you want to check that out.
And that's direct, like DIRECT?
That's it, yep.
Well, that sounds valuable.
Yeah. You know what? DirecTV should buy it because all I get is complaints about DirecTV.
Really?
Yeah, everybody's cursing me out on Twitter all the time.
Yeah, sounds like you have a college tuition maybe in there.
Yeah, I hope so.
That name. How about you, Mike?
I'm at mmars9, so that's MMARZ9 on Twitter or GDO. sagosolutions.com, stackstarter.io. Cool project that we have going on, so definitely check that out.
All right, excellent. And as usual, I'm Stephen Cross, at Stephen Cross with a PH. How about you, John? People can track you down.
John Picozzi, all the major social networks at John Picozzi.
And how about you, Nick?
You can find me online at Nixvan, NICXVAN, pretty much everywhere.
Okay, look for us at exploringdrupal8.com for episode number 3 on theming. Take care, guys.
All right.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.